Hello and welcome to this event with Jorge Frascara, arranged by the Design Literacy International Network. My name is Liv Merete Nielsen. I'm a professor emerita at the Oslo Metropolitan University, and I'm leading this network together with Ursula Brava and Eric Bohemia. We created this network in London in 2019 to open up for a wide discussion on the role of design research for a better tomorrow. And in order to move in such a direction, non-designers, meaning the general public, in their position as politicians, consumers, users, and clients, needs to be involved, skilled, and critical. In other words, the general public will need to be design literate. Building upon the ideas of the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire writings and his practice in the 1970s, he wrote The Pedagogy for the Oppressed, promoting reading and writing skills to everybody. Today, more and more decisions are based upon visual representations and design, and therefore we need to challenge the hegemonistic position that reading, writing, and arithmetic have in general education by adding design literacy. This is of increased importance for democratic participation, diversity, and equity in society. And researchers have the possibility to articulate myths, analyze, and discuss them. Through this series, Engage with Ideas, it's our hope to open up for different perspectives on design literacy, both for professional designers and for the general public. It's an honor for the network to have Jorge Frascara with us today, presenting some of his thoughts. Ursula will give a short introduction to Frascara's work. So please, Ursula, the screen is yours, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Liv. Buenos días, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, everywhere. My name is Ursula Bravo. I am from Universidad del Desarrollo. And I have to confess that when I started to prepare this introduction, I searched information about Jorge's career on the internet. And I found information like Jorge is a professor emeritus at the University of Alberta. He was born in Argentina. He has published many books, both in English and Spanish, and also articles. And all of this kind of information you can also find on the internet, even on our website. So I decided to do a more personal introduction. And I tried to remember when was the first time I came across Jorge's ideas, but I couldn't. Nevertheless, I do remember when was the first time I borrowed some of his ideas. And it was in a very challenging moment of my career. I was advising the Ministry of Education in Chile during the evaluation process of the textbooks that the government gave to all the school students of the public and subsidized schools. That means more than 80% of Chilean school students. And in my country, those textbooks can be the only books in a home. So the process of selecting those books is very relevant from a social perspective. And the other challenging issue was that for the first time, this process considered design. And I mean the textbooks, visual communication, and also the participation of designers as evaluators. So that meant that the government considered the visual communication as a key element of the teaching and learning process. My responsibility was to call, select, and train designers as evaluators. And I want to create a dialogue to make connections between design and education perspectives. So I decided to use a distinction given by Jorge in one of his books, Design and Communication. And in this book, Jorge distinguished between design for persuasion, for information, for administration, and for education. And according to this perspective, design for education seeks to promote behavioral changes, but not in a mathematical way as design for persuasion, but in a reflective way. And because design for education is about human being development. And I found so powerful this idea that from this day and from time to time, I come back to it. And for this reason, I want to acknowledge Jorge today for having shared this and many other ideas in his books, his articles, and of course today in this talk. Y también te quiero dar las gracias en castellano, Jorge, porque en este entorno tan global y virtual y bastante deslocalizado, me parece importante hacerlo en nuestra lengua materna. So, thank you, Jorge. Welcome to Design Literacy International Network. The screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Ursula and Liv. And to begin with, I thank you all, the organizers, let's say Liv, Ursula, Eric, for running this, keeping it alive, and inviting me to do my piece. I also thank new friends and old friends that I see on the screen here attending, so I'm very happy to have you here. I told this to Eric, but I want to share it with everybody. This article was born as the results of a review that I did for design issues many years ago, like around 2006. When I was given the article, of course, blind, the article was rather crafted on the edge of acceptance or not. I thought that my overall evaluation was not to accept it. But at the same time, I felt that I had to argue very much in detail why I was not wanting to accept it, rather than do a more cursory evaluation as compared to that one that I normally do. Partly because I didn't know where the editor stood. And I didn't want to be unpolite if somebody, the author was somebody of their circle. So anyway, when I submitted the thing and some weeks went by and the article was rejected as I was recommending, Richard Buchanan said, you know, that review was quite interesting. So why don't you turn it into an article and submit it to Design Issues? So I did. And that was the birth of this. So I give you that background because I thought it's relevant. Like sometimes you do something and you don't know where it's going, and then it turns into something else. And then 14 years later, Eric calls me and says, you know, how about this? So here I am. I will engage with you through a sharing of the screen, and I can, for technical reasons, I cannot make it full screen, but I will begin there. So that's the title of the article, Hiding Lack of Knowledge, Bad Words in Design Education, which is something I have seen for many years, not only in design. In my academic background began in fine arts. In the Buenos Aires system, I could enter the school very early in life. And I found bad profs and excellent profs, and I had, you know, all the colors of the spectrum, and including those, there was a guy, a teacher of printmaking, that said once, but Jorge, you want me to tell you in 10 minutes what took me 30 years to learn? And I said, yes. Because, you know, I mean, what's the point otherwise? You're getting a salary and you want to dose off whatever you know. And basically what was happening was that the guy didn't know that much. And he would have been able to tell me in 10 minutes what he learned in 30 years. So I have seen the situation repeating itself all the time. Why bad words in design education? And I will enter into those bad words soon. But I first wanted to thank everybody here for letting me in and speak my mind. So those were the two words I was dealing with at the time. I found in talking with colleagues, talking in conferences, meeting, working, etc. I began to teach design in 1963. So a few years ago. So the idea of design has been growing with me. Let's say what design meant in 1963, particularly communication design, that is my field, was quite different from what I'm doing now. And certainly what I'm doing now, I didn't learn it in school, because basically design education in Argentina did not exist in the 50s. The first program came in 63, and from then on, little by little. But the point is that both words are very complex, because of course, both are very important words. And it's not that they are themselves bad words, but they are abused in a very intellectually lazy fashion, so that people talk about creativity, people expect the intuition to be impossible to forget in design education. But for my experience and for what I read other people, intuition is something that one can exercise when one has a hell of a lot of knowledge. Let's say it's the accumulation of knowledge that goes beyond the normal knowledge of people around a given subject that takes you to be able to exercise intuition, which is a very fast way of operating mentally. If you go to Herbert Simon, he says that a grandmaster in chess can remember 50,000 configurations, and so the person, say, in a very fast way, can understand what's happening in the chessboard and think about a number of possible options to do the next move. But the person was not born like that. It's not that you say, okay, intuition, fantastic. Let's say, I don't know if you're familiar with Gregory Bateson. Is a person that when he was in his mature age, he exercised a lot of intuition, but I cannot believe that that word can apply to a first-year student in design. There is a lot to learn to be able to then step up. And there is another author that I look up very much, Daniel Kahneman. He's a psychologist, and he talks about system 1 and system 2 in thinking. System 1 being what we use every day, like it's actions that we have learned over time. Can it be physical? It can be mental. But basically, it's the exercise of intuition. But intuition is something that is possible to use when one is developed. It cannot be used at the beginning, and it cannot be used that easily outside of your knowledge domain. Let's say I can do intuitively a lot of things in decisions about the visual presentation of text, because I have been hammering that for the last 58 years. But I cannot say, okay, then if I can use intuition there, I can also cook. No, I can't cook. My wife cooks far better than I. And it's because she has actually paid attention to the things and knows how the ingredients operate. So in Kahneman's lingo, System 1 is a system that one uses every day and is fast and is very efficient. System 2 is slow. And when you get a problem, a difficult, complex problem involving a bunch of people and a bunch of factors, there's no way you can use System 1. In all my experience, and as I say, I have a hell of a number of years of experience, I always need research in front of a project. I could always begin well, because the variety of things I have dealt with in my professional life is enormous, but I cannot complete the project as well as I could if I get the information I'm missing. And one of the things is, that is important in life is know what is that you don't know. So be aware of that. And the people who support the notion that intuition can be exercised in the first years of studies really don't realize the extent to which those people who mix ignorance with arrogance and believe that they can use intuition to solve problems are out to lunch. It's not possible. I cannot accept that. I can accept that people should be, in education, one should push people to develop more and more the capacity to recognize patterns. Like if we go to other authors that I like very much, Jeff Hawkins, he is the author of On Intelligence. He says the brain is good at two things: recognizing patterns and predicting the future. Because predicting the future, in the beginning of our time as humans running around naked in the prairies, it was very important, because if you didn't predict what the lion was going to do, you got eaten. So it's an ability that was for hundreds of thousands of years developed to be able to survive. And the recognition of patterns the same, because the recognition of patterns and the creation of behavioral patterns in the brain has to do with saving energy. The brain consumes an enormous amount of energy, but patterns help you go for wholesale. They say, like when you put your shoes on and you start tying up, you don't problematize how the strings goes, that you can make a knot, and no, you just do it. Well, that because then you spend far less energy. When you take a shower, you don't think, how am I going to dry myself today? I said, should I begin by the feet or should I begin by my back? No, it's all like that. Well, that's daily life is okay. But when I worked on, as many of you would know, on traffic safety communication planning, I cannot do with system one. I cannot just say, oh yes, I got it. Yeah, which is what I see in the streets here. Like I saw the other day a poster that has the keys of a car inside a glass of whiskey and says, don't mix it. And what behavioral change is it going to be obtained like that? How many people are going to wake up and say, oh, illuminated, now I'm going to drive safely because I used to be a wreck all the time. So then, I'm fan of evidence-based design. I look for material, people that have done other things that have to do with the problem I have in front of me. And I try to base as much as I can. It's not possible to base everything, but as much as I can, my decisions on something that has been really thought after. There is another author who's not, for me, as important, but he hits on a very good point. Steve Krug, K-R-U-G, has a book that says, it's called Don't Make Me Think. Because thinking, he's a computer scientist, thinking is an effort. It's an effort. So people try not to think, and the brain is naturally lazy. I mean, if you, when you have to study, it's tiring. I get sleepy. I have to perk myself to wake up. So anyway, that's the way I see things happening here. Now, so the abuse of the terms come from intellectual laziness, in my view. This is something that I found when I was department chairman in Canada. I was visiting the classes, and I was noticing that there was a painting class where the instructor was never there. So I ran into him in the cafeteria, and I asked him, you know, could I talk with you sometime? Sure. So he came to my office, and I said, you know, I visited your class several times to see what is going on, and you were not here. Well, it's that I don't want to interfere. Well, buddy, I mean, you're paid to interfere if that's what you call education. This is not, the students are not going to learn by just you throwing a problem to them and walking out, going to the cafeteria. But some extreme cases, an extreme case, no? Too complicated, make it simpler. I have seen that in design education a lot of times. Why is it simpler better? Just because at a certain point in the 1920s, somebody thought that. But it's not better. And then the other thing that happens is that people confuse visual simplicity with cognitive simplicity. So the important thing is that it should be cognitively simple if we're talking about visual communication, not that it has to be visually simple. Too complicated, make it simpler in an authoritarian way. It's not education, it's not teaching, it's not training, that is interference. And sometimes the solution that instructors have, this needs more work, you know, and send you off. So those are all connected things to then the thing of telling the student, you have to be more creative. And what does it mean? To be less conventional, to be different, even if it's not good, it doesn't matter. So, okay, let us keep on going. Those are myths for me. I mean, now, I don't want just to keep on talking alone. Is there anybody that has any reaction to this, anything that wants to be clarified or that wants to kill me virtually? Not yet. I didn't go to the chat. I don't know if there's any.
Are these the myths of coming from as a myths of that are described in like anthropology, or are they different type of myths?
Yeah, in a way, they are cultural myths in the subculture of design. The creativity, the intuition, and then we have more. I mean, like I wrote this 14 years ago, 15 years ago, when nobody talked yet about transition design, when I don't know if anybody talked about design thinking or everybody used design sprints. And transition design, I really never got to understand exactly what it means, because culture in design has been transitioning since I began to work, as I say, in 1963, and it has been changing and continues to be changing. So we are always dealing with a transition in, you know, it's a Heraclitus thing. You cannot bathe twice in the same river because it flows, and you are not going to be the same person anyway, so who cares? Now, the design thinking is a very good marketing tool by the studios that use it as a sort of design magic, that they own design thinking. You don't have it, you're a poor business person, and you will have to believe us. We're going to just stand you. But we're not going to tell you enough, so you keep on hiring us to do the thinking ourselves. And then it becomes some kind of a buzzword by all kinds of, and for me, it's immoral, basically. Tell me more about it, you know, like, and the same with design sprints, you know, there are people say, oh, yes, you know, in 5 days, I can solve any problem. You know, day one is like that, day two is this, and day three is this. Give me an absolute break, please. You know, before getting into traffic safety communications, I dedicated 2 years to read about the problem. I dedicated 2 years to understand what really was happening. Then I was integrated in a group that were about 18 people from different fields that were connected somehow or other to the problem, from emergency physicians to helicopter pilots to designers. And we managed to have an impact. Let's see, we managed to reduce the incidence by 19%, which meant when you think about 27,000 hospitalizations in a year, that went down to 22,000, with a tremendous amount of implications for the life of the people, particularly if you start thinking that 1,800 had spinal cord damage. So that is the kind of thing that I'm interested in, and it doesn't come from intuition. To get that result, you have to really get deep into the problem. I met with dangerous drivers in focus groups and in individual interviews, and you would get flabbergasted at the different way in which people think about life and death. So let's see now the next one. We were in an event, my wife and I, Guillermina Noel, and there were some, a sort of a design sprint done, because I wanted to get wet with the thing and see how does it work. And Guillermina asked one of the leaders of one of the groups, and what do you do? I am a design thinker. Okay, good. Now I know you. So what do you mean? I mean, what is that? I find the tremendous lack of articulation. That's why they are myths. There's not that somebody can really say, this is what I'm selling. So that's the need for descriptions, not labels, so that okay, this is what it is. This is the background to sensitivity, to intuition, knowledge, skill, sensitivity, experience, and a lot of work. A concert pianist remembers around 3,000 notes for one concert, and not remember the notes, but how to play them. Like what is the pressure of the fingers on each one, and it's something that exceeds the brain. As a pianist, your memory is in your arms, is in your feet, is in your fingers. That doesn't result from intuition. That results from an enormous discipline, a tremendous hard work. And that's the way in which I would like design to be understood. Then we have imitation, which is another ghost in the room. And it's easier than judgment. Some time ago, designers were obsessed with being at the leading edge of visual style. And they would look at somebody and say, oh, God. And then, I wrote another article many years ago that was called Graphic Design, Fine Art, or Social Science. Exactly attacking that disease of producing things that sends designers into rage of emotion, and nobody understands what the hell the thing means. So, and it began in the 20s and continues. Then when we landed on postmodernism, we got it sort of again. So imitation of style was something that occupied many designers who had that problem of intellectual laziness. Where what we need is that research is a systematic creation of knowledge. Research is not open exploration. Like sometimes the same person that said that he didn't want to interfere in his painting classes, he was referring to his painting as research. And no, it was not research, it was painting. And it was painting of the most spontaneous and explosive and unprogrammed and reflective sort. But because in the university it became normal that you talk about teaching and research, people who do not do research at all call whatever they do, whatever it is, research. So one has to be rigid, let's say, in the meaning of certain terms, if we want to be credible. An image is worth 1,000 words. Another myth. Is it? Is it always? When is it? You know, not really. You know, I'm not going to bore you with hundreds of examples, but it's obvious. The user prefers, or the user prefer, all of them, that they prefer serves better to perform the task. Many times I get to work with young beginning students who say, oh, yes, I researched this, and you know, the users prefer this one instead of that one. Oh, yes. And what else? You know, did you try them to use it? Did you try them to see whether they remember the information, whether they understood the information, whether they can apply the information? Or it was just they say, which one you like best, A or B? Oh, B. Oh, yes, B. Yes, cooler. Yeah, okay. So again, communication design and design in general is a slow task. You cannot just pull it from the hip. Theory. There are some people that believe that theory is something that is in that department there, and practice is in this other department here, and then they try to write books about what is the real meaning of the word design. Well, I don't care. They say design is what you do, and the definition emerges from the work. It doesn't emerge from the work. It reminds me Middle Ages, you know, the long discussions about the sex of angels, and whether the angels had, wings with feathers or was other kind of wing. And you wonder, you know, what does that have to do with life? The same with these things. You cannot design without having a mindset about what the thing should be. So you cannot design without research. You cannot design without having some kind of a theory, but theorizing about specific individual aspects of design is not a piece of cake. And if it doesn't inform the practice, it's another thing, which is quite interesting to have. But I am a designer. So self-centered in the practice of the profession. Yes, I have published 11 books. But they are all based on my practice and my understanding of the practice. It's not an edifice that is held by itself. Reality. This is making reference, moving from the how to define the word design to looking at my experience in traffic injuries in North America. At that point, that is 15 years ago, the cost was $150 billion a year in healthcare, 5 million working days lost, 2.7 million of hospitalizations, and 180,000 spinal cord injuries, plus 40,000 deaths. So that's a reality that I find far more attractive to deal with than sitting and trying to define the word design. Educating and training. Both indispensable, both different. Training is helping something acquire the existing information in the domain where you are teaching, you know. And that's the way I taught in 1963. I thought that my function was to teach what I knew. I didn't think that my function was all the rest, because when we talk about education, we talk about the adoption of cultural values. We talk about the development of general human skills, no acquisition of knowledge, but becoming a better person become a person that is more useful, more human. And one of the main objectives that I think today in connection with teaching is that the students should learn how to learn. Not learn what I'm telling them, but just develop a stronger ability to learn, because things change constantly. The knowledge that we have in the domain of design keeps on growing all the time. My control panel is enormous compared to what it was at the beginning. William McCarthy, that was an author, was an interviewee in an article that I wrote for the CG Journal of Design, Economics and Innovation. It's an issue that Guillermina guest edited. The most important thing that he said in the interview, in teaching, one should teach students the love for learning. If you get them there, then you can walk away. You know, it's the most important starting point. And that's part of education, it's not training. Articulating knowledge, learning to be able to translate your knowledge into transmissible knowledge is another thing that competes to education. Being conscious about your choices and your taking of a position among the myriad of positions that can be taken vis-a-vis whatever situation. Be aware of the broad context that surrounds the specific problem you're confronting. I organized a conference in 2003 that was called Creating Communication Spaces. And it was oriented at making sure that as designers, we not only pay attention to the crafting of our message or our objects, but we pay attention to the context within which those products operate. Because without that, it's very poor what we can get. And finally, in education, what has to foster in the students the capacity to develop good judgment. So that's the difference between educating. So what are design schools doing about this? Well, some are doing better, some are not doing that well, and most are not doing well. Design requires interdisciplinary knowledge, and interdisciplinary knowledge requires disciplinary competence. It's not the solution to be superficial about a bunch of things. There has to be in the interdisciplinary group somebody that knows really a lot about one of the components of the equation. As an embracing notion, design must be a socially, environmentally, and professionally responsible human activity. If you are just going to base all your educational efforts on creativity and intuition, you are lost. You cannot do that. That requires a lot of work, a lot of reflection, a lot of responsibility. The designer must be always vigilant. This is something that Thomas Maldonado said once at a meeting in Venice, when he was asked, of your many virtues, let's say, which is the one thing that you consider to have been the most important in your professional life? And he said that, to be always vigilant, always assessing what is being done and what to do next. Always conscious of the multiple impacts a design intervention could have beyond the project's objectives. I have said for a long time, there are two impacts. One is the operational impact. Let's say, do you want people to learn better to say basic arithmetics in grade 1 and do the right tool to help kids? That's okay. Then what other consequences that have? What is the cultural impact in addition to that one? Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not controlled. And when I see the advertisement for selling cars, for instance, they are all wrong. They are all selling freedom and power and control, and it's not happening when you drive that way. There ain't freedom because you hit walls. Yes, you have power until you get to the tree. So it's a constant fight. That's why in my field, in that traffic safety communications, you can never stop. Because as soon as you stop, you're not working against nothing. You're working against a cataract of instigations for improper driving behavior. Okay, so let's talk about all this. This is all. So now the floor is yours. I spoke a bit longer than I thought, but hope you don't mind. Who wants to say something?
Thank you so much, Jorge. I think I think you have stirred up the pot, so to speak, and I think there's lots of comments in the chat. But what I'll do is I'll ask to people to come in, and if you can, you may or may not put your camera on, but do ask your questions as when I mention names. And I think we can maybe kick off with perhaps we can kick off with Kesa. You were talking about issues on the chat. Would you like to? And there are a number of them about behavioral models and education. Would you like to come in and ask your questions or make a comment?
Oh yeah, I think yeah. Hey, can everyone hear me?
Perfect. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your article. Like it was intriguing, and it made me start thinking about things differently. I'm a product of a design education, and just looking at even some of my friends, we all like designers, even though I work outside. I don't really think that creativity and intuition is like deeply valued within design schools. I think it's talked about, and they use it in various ways, but I don't think it's highly valued, because even if it is valued, they look at creativity. It's only looked at creativity through like a very marginalized lens. It's not that, creativity can come in all different forms and fashion, and it's how like we document it and we talk about it. But it's only looked at like certain people can be creative and certain people can't. So that's my comment. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about like, I saw how you like structured it, saying that, those words probably don't have like a deep meaning to it. But I wanted you to just kind of like elaborate, at least from like what I shared and where you have been thinking.
I just want to say one thing about creativity, that sometimes, am I hearable? Yes.
Yeah.
That sometimes people talk about creativity as if it were property of the arts.
Right.
I think that creativity goes across every field. It was impressive, the velocity.
I'm sorry, Jorge, perdona que te interrumpa, solo queríamos pedirte si puedes dejar de compartir tu pantalla y así podemos tener un feeling más de conversación. Muchas gracias y disculpa la interrupción.
No, está bien, yo pensaba si tal vez quería hacer alguien referencia a algo en particular, pero that's okay. The speed with which a vaccine for COVID was developed is absolutely incredible. Not only a vaccine, several, some better, some worse, some we don't know exactly what they are going to do with us, but I have both, and I believe in Louis Pasteur and the notion of vaccines. And so I think that there was a lot of creativity there. You would need a lot of creativity in Argentina to resolve the economic issues there, but you need knowledge as well. Like the thing is, for me, creativity arises when the knowledge of a group about a given problem rises way above the usual current knowledge. So that group will come with a solution, and I say group because today it's very difficult to really innovate in isolation, hiding in your room. So that's my take. I don't know exactly. I have not done recently a lot of research on how people are educating designers, but what I have seen throughout my life is that there's a lot of emphasis on training and very little on education. And also very often there is very little knowledge about educational psychology in schools of design. So how does a person actually learn something? And that's where then sometimes they say, I sometimes use the word creativity, but I use it in a context that has been already, let's say, explained or discussed. The same intuition is a very useful thing, but only at certain levels of high sophistication in knowledge. That's the point. So I don't know, you might have, the plural you, different experiences in different schools, and some that are more respectable than others. At that point, I thought that it was, and it keeps on being today, because of what I said about design sprints and design thinking and what have you, that will be the next one. It's a problem to be concerned with in design education. I don't know if I answered your question, Case, or
no, you answered it and you gave me a lot more. So thank you.
Okay,
that's great. Thank you. Can I go to Kanupriya? You had a question, Kanupriya?
So you were talking about interdisciplinary knowledge in design. So I'm a master's student now, but in my bachelor's, like there's streams in design and divisions like product or communication or fashion. So if it has to be interdisciplinary knowledge, then there should be no divisions in design. What do you think on this?
Well, what I think is that when people say, oh yes, we teach interdisciplinarily, and our students take industrial design and graphic design, and I end up wondering, where's the interdiscipline there? To the point that with my colleagues in industrial design, we exchange very often lectures, because when you talk about design beyond the object, there's lots of common traits. When I talk about interdisciplinarily working, I'm talking about the major issue, in my view, in design, that is not exclusively solvable with technical knowledge. You have to know about people, because in the final analysis, design is for people. One way or another, objects of use, communications, or even now services, or the design of systems where people work, designing the interpersonal relations of members of an organization. All that is requiring, and the best work that I have done, like including this of traffic safety, but I did other things some of you might be familiar with in connection with children with learning disabilities. I need other people that know about the topic, because we seldom design for designers, and we seldom design about design. More often than not, let's say, like my wife and I work on health. We cannot work on health issues without physicians, without chemists, without pharmacists, without the whole array of people that are involved. Okay, so that's what I call interdiscipline. where actually there are very distinct fields of knowledge coming together.
And I think, yeah, we're slowly running out of time, but there's more and more questions. But maybe we take another 2 or 3, and then we try to wrap this up. Okay.
Okay.
If I go to Arnaldo, you made a nice comment. Would you mind? And we go to Pilar, and then we go to Mariabo. Okay.
Okay.
Arnaldo.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yes.
So I found very interesting what Jorge was saying about research. My comment was that research, I have many students, and most of the time when they talk about research, what they're actually talking is about reading. So they go to the literature and they search the literature and they come up with some ideas. Research is more than that. And as I said in my comment, usually research are not methodologically informed, we're not theoretically informed. This is something that I have discussed with Jorge many times. But I want to take this opportunity to ask Jorge to elaborate a little bit more about research, evidence-based design, and social responsibility. There is something that I don't know if Jorge mentioned, but well-being, how those things are linked, connected.
Well, you know, Arnaldo, everything is connected to everything, as Frischel Capra says. But it is a problem, and the designer's perception of the problem what determines what is needed in order to address that problem properly. So when let's see, to give you, traffic safety is a case in which I work with the broadest team. Legislators, police, pilots of aircraft, drivers of ambulances, paramedics, medics, engineers, what have you. So in other cases, like for a project that I did, design a special alphabet for children without working memory, practically. I worked with a psychologist who had identified the problem with an educational psychologist that advised us in terms of how to try to help them regain the knowledge, help them gain the knowledge of the alphabet. So that one thing I do is that I read, but I read normally, it's a back and forth between experts' advice and reading. Like experts cut down the time, because if I would go in the University of Alberta to the shelf of books on educational psychology, I'd have to dedicate my life to that, and it's not going to be good long enough. So I need people who help me zero in, not for me to become an expert, but to be able to understand the problem that the expert will have to solve. It gives me the ability to communicate with them. I have done, in the main, observations when working on a system, computer website, a website on response to catastrophes in the province of Alberta. And I found 63 ergonomic issues with the website. And I did it through interviews of different users. In that case, there were the people in the central hub that coordinated the information that was coming. And it could be natural disaster, it could be a major accident or something like that. So I went to the office, I sat there a couple of days from morning to evening to see how the work was done. And I found all kinds of things. In addition, I was doing interviews to the individuals that were key players. I was analyzing the website and working with users or potential users. So I have done a lot of field work. And always careful not to overstep my knowledge and abilities, but just looking from the problem backwards. You know, who do I need? Where are my gaps of knowledge that I need? And how can I get that knowledge? And how can that be translated from research results to design criteria? And that's, I think, is a crucial step. And then once you have that, of course, you prototype and you test the prototypes. Like before you go to the field, you have done a lot of generation of new knowledge. And as I said at the very beginning, that was a very complex project. Others are very complex as well, but others are simpler. And I know, let's say, 80% of the solution, but I never know 100% of the solution or of the best possible solution. You know, I use the word solution with hesitance because our problems are qualitative. So you can never solve them. It's not like, say, you know, how much is 8 times 5? No, that doesn't work that way. So you're always having to be humble about what you're doing and careful, as the physicians say, to do no harm. That's the most important thing of all.
If we can go to Pilar. Pilar, would you like to ask your question, please? Thank you.
Sí, gracias. Buenos días, Jorge. Sobre todo, hay un nexo acá con todo lo que Jorge de alguna manera nos ha expuesto, y en algún momento de la vida nos reunió porque él fue examinador de mi tesis de doctorado. Y la verdad que él tuvo una capacidad de entender un problema que era la discapacidad, un tema muy poco tratado, y en el cual fue muy difícil hacer un tema en esta línea en diseño, pero finalmente la Universidad de Barcelona lo aceptó. Y bueno, a mí me causó mucho placer el saber que él iba a estar y que a pesar de una mirada tan difícil, iba a poder entender una propuesta tan compleja. Y eso principalmente, y lo escucho ahora y entiendo que tiene todas las capacidades en términos de que uno puede hacer muchas cosas creativas, pero la creatividad no sirve sola. La creatividad tiene que venir con una sensibilización para entender el entorno y de alguna manera hoy día entender que todos estamos invitados al banquete del diseño y que efectivamente el esfuerzo que tiene que hacer el diseño en entender a las distintas personas requiere este conocimiento y esta empatía que le he escuchado hoy día. Así que principalmente era eso, no quería dejar pasar la oportunidad de dejar el tema de la diversidad puesta en el cierto que hoy día hay tanta gente, tantos diseñadores que son importantes en cada una de sus escuelas, y pensar que no todos ven, no todos escuchan de la misma manera, no todos cruzan la calle con la misma seguridad o con las mismas competencias, las mismas capacidades. Dejar instalado el tema y también dejar esto de tener un diseñador que ha sido capaz de alguna manera de visualizar y transmitir a otras generaciones. Para mí también fue muy importante toda su obra en este trabajo que llevó para que las personas ciegas a través de sus capacidades, también ustedes a través de las charlas de gracias, y de nuevo también por todas tus aclaraciones que...
Ups, la perdimos. We lost her. Well, Pilar, if you're listening, thank you very much.
Bueno, justo se cortó, disculpa.
Yeah. Okay.
Gracias.
Okay, muchas gracias, Pilar. Okay, no, we have another person left, right?
Okay, I think that was a really nice comment from Pilar, and I think we're going to wrap up with the very last questions. Maria Abo, would you mind to come in, please?
Yes, hello. Thank you for this talk, for this amazing talk. I just wanted to ask, like, I'm a design student, and I would really like to know, like, what advice would you give us as design students? And some of us would maybe in the future become future professors. So how can we really teach kids to learn on their own and to love learning on their own?
Harvey Feinberg, who was the director of the National Institute of Health in the United States, has a chat in Voices of Leadership from the Field in Harvard University. Because the topic was leadership, somebody asked, how do you learn to be a leader? And he said, being a leader. So my advice to you, do you want to know how to learn? Try to learn. How do you try to learn? Well, I was blessed in my life by a friend called Juan Carrera, who was 14 years older than I and a classmate. That's not true. We studied together. I was very fresh. I was 17. He was 31. He had a degree in pharmacy and an endless memory and a very clear scientific mind. And I would read tons of things and I will tell them what I read. And he would say, that you said here connects with this that you said here and with that. And if you put it together and you realize comparing, contrasting, separating, analyzing, categorizing, let's say, finding the way in which the information can be reorganized in your terms, not as a continuum prose, but as clusters of coherent topical or problem areas. But, schools are not about teaching, they are about learning. Some people get it wrong. The most important, I was, I did a sign in my last class that I did a year ago that said, the most important thing in this course is not what I get to say, but what you get to learn. Like some people believe, okay, yes, I say a lot and I throw, and then the students don't learn anything because they are absolutely overwhelmed. I cannot get an indigestion of bad information. So it's crucial. Your question is crucial, but the thing is that it's very well up to you. The first ingredient that I would suggest you to develop, as if it were a muscle, curiosity. The more curious you are about why somebody says something or why somebody proposes something, the better, the farther you're going to get in understanding the way you need to understand things. I just want to, I hope that answers your question. I cannot avoid sending a greeting to Karel van der Waarde that has been there quietly sitting and listening. Old friends from at the time I organized conferences in Edmonton in the 90s. So anyway, and the rest other people that I know. So thank you very much for your attention. So Eric, if you want to wrap up, it's your baby.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, thank you so much. And what is really amazing is that, this is more than a 2-decade, ideas that you have shared, and we are, still is stirring up, today. Those ideas still carry on. But what I would like to do is to actually go to Liv and let her to wrap up the talk. And and just thank you. And yeah, there's more and more questions that they're popping up. But yeah, we ran out of time, and hopefully we'll have you sometimes in the future again to follow up on this. Liv?
I would also like to say thank you, and it has been a pleasure to be a part of today's presentation and discussion. And when planning this event, it gave me the opportunity to go further into some of your writings. And I'm impressed, and like the way you handle topics today. I like the way you handle topics today. You articulate and analyze myths and make it possible to discuss them. So when when Ursula, Erik, and I decided how we could kind of show our gratitude, we decided that we would like to show our acknowledge for your great contribution to design education by giving you our acknowledgement. And Ursula, could you please show for us? So this, George, it's the first time we give such an acknowledgement to Jorge Frascara for his contribution to the design education research. And we would like to print it out nicely and send it to you. And we really hope that you will like it. Thank you.
That's very nice. I don't know if some people disappear, but I see that they have not. So I want to thank Hans Caspar Hugenthaler for being present, and Jorge Hirter, new colleagues here at the Hochschule Lucerne. There are surely other people that I might know, but sometimes some people have only the names there and not the faces. Sometimes I'm better at faces, sometimes I'm better at names. So sorry that I went a bit longer than I thought in my presentation, so there was not much time. But I would like if you people can send me the chat material after, so that I could, in writing, react to the topics, and we can return to the people that attended today, whatever I have to say about those questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so what?
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to wrap up, and just what we're going to do is to inform about the next month talk.
Okay. Okay, so I let you the floor.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay, I listen to what you have to say.
Liv? You have to unmute yourself, Liv. Your lips are moving, no sound.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. On August the 3rd, we will have a new presentation. Nenad Pavel, he is also from Oslo Metropolitan University, and he will give us a talk on alternative design pedagogy. And it's based upon his PhD, which he gave about 1 year ago. So please join in on the 3rd of August also. It will be a pleasure to have as many as possible to come and listen. And I hope we can also continue some of the topics that you have addressed today, George, and we can sort of continue some of the discussion and be that forum which we like to be, joining forces together and perhaps make better learning for our students. So thank you for everyone who has participated, and please join us also on the 3rd of August. Thank you, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much
Bye.
for joining.
Bye, everybody.